This episode of Point of View Uncensored is sponsored by Juicy Details, here located on the southeast side of Atlanta. Well, welcome to Point of View Uncensored. I'm Dr. Renaissance, and today we have with us a special guest with us, Miss Alisha Searcy. How you doing today?
I am wonderful. How are you?
Pretty well, can't complain. Nice little Saturday, a little gloomy. But a lot of stuff going on, with all this campaigning going on, I thought it would be a great opportunity to interview you because I see that you're running for the state Georgia Superintendent position.
Yes, I am.
And myself being a teacher, I felt it was, definitely a duty of mine, to at least, have a conversation with you to get an understanding, what the position is, what is your plans for the position, and how you're going to plan to, make a future within education.
Absolutely. So, first of all, thank you for what you do as an educator.
Thank you. I appreciate it. We don't hear it enough, but thank you so much.
You definitely don't. And I'm a former superintendent, so I understand.
Wow.
And I think, frankly, the last 2 years, if you have not been in a classroom, you don't even know what it's like to be a teacher right now. So thank you for what you do.
Now, have you been a teacher before?
Never been a teacher.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I skipped a few spots.
Okay.
I went from state legislator to superintendent. I got a master's degree in education leadership, went through 2 really intense superintendent training programs, and then became a superintendent.
Oh, wow. So where were you superintendent at?
Ivy Prep Schools. It's a network of all-girls schools here in Metro Atlanta.
I've heard of Ivy Prep before. Oh, wow. Okay. So how does that, because I know a lot, one of the concerns I hear people say, is people like not becoming teachers, but they kind of get in a leadership role. Like, what is your take on people such as yourself doing that type of role? Oh.
Great question. I think all of these jobs are a calling. I was not called to be a classroom teacher. My calling is leadership and management and doing turnaround work. And when I was a superintendent, when I was a local superintendent, hopefully I'm going to be the state superintendent.
Okay.
But it's a leadership job. And especially coming from the state legislature, it gave me certainly the policy perspective. But when you are a practitioner, in my case as a superintendent, it's leadership, it's management, it's how you, create and manage a budget. How do you hire people? It's at the time that I was superintendent, we had a $14 million bond. We had rental properties. And it was a charter network, so it was different than a traditional public school, but still public schools. And there was a lot of turnaround work, right? So all of our state and federal programs were out of compliance. The elementary had a 43 CCRPI score. If educators are watching this and you know what CCRPI is, one of the middle schools had a 65. Teacher retention rate was 25%. And so lots of things were broken in the system. And, my calling and my area of expertise is in leadership and management. So being able to come in, develop a shared vision across all of our schools, hire the right principals, completely change the way we hire teachers, manage the budget. At that time when I went in, all of our schools were in debt. I will never forget, I started on a Monday, but the Friday before, teachers had to come on Friday after 5 o'clock to come and get a paper check because the schools could not afford to make payroll.
Oh, wow.
So when you go into a superintendent role, certainly having a background in teaching is important and it's probably helpful, but it's not going to be the preparation that you need, right, to get a budget back in place, right, to understand the policies that are passed from the state level in order to implement those system-wide, to be able to manage board relations. So there are a bunch of skill sets that are required to be a superintendent that I had and that I have, that I was able to come in and get that 43 to an 85, get that 65 to an 81, and our teacher retention rate went from 25% to 75%. So while I've not been a classroom teacher, any teacher who has worked in the schools that I led will tell you that I have a lot of respect for teachers. They felt supported and respected and honored. I made sure they had all the resources they needed to be successful. I did things like give every single teacher in our buildings a $500 professional development budget, right? So imagine at your school, I'm guessing everybody gets the same PD on Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever it is. Sometimes it's connected to your evaluation, sometimes it's not. Usually it has to do with classroom management, am I right?
Correct.
Well, in our schools, We didn't do that. Their professional development was based, when it was school wide, it was based on what's the data saying, what do we need to support teachers. But then each teacher had their own budget where you could say, you know what, I really want to focus on literacy. So let me spend my money on that and taking this course or going to this conference. And so for me, even as I run for state school superintendent, what I need teachers to know is that I have your back. That the very first thing that I did when I became superintendent at Ivy Prep is listen. I spent time listening to teachers with town hall meetings. We did one-on-one meetings. I did a lot of observations in classrooms because I wanted to get an understanding, what do you need to be successful? I don't think our public education system works if teachers are unhappy. And so that's the same thing that I'll do as state school superintendent. So that was a long answer, but I wanted you to know my background. Just the other day, I mentioned that I went through a superintendent's training program.
Okay. You did.
One of my cohort members is the former superintendent of Boston Public Schools. He was here in town. We had dinner. We have another one of our cohort members who is now the superintendent of Colorado Springs.
Okay.
So someone else was in Los Angeles. So these are people who are serious superintendents that I also can call on at any time to help and provide support. I have access to some of the best thinking in this country. I'm also supported by our former United States Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, as well as former Secretary of Education, Rod Page, who's a Republican appointee. So I also have a lot of bipartisan support. All these things are important when you're making decisions about a system. And that's what I am. I'm a systems leader.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
Y'all heard that?
Yes, they
Tell
definitely
me.
have. Okay.
Those things are important.
Okay. And my main concern is our current education system. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I'm definitely concerned. I'm concerned for our future, of our children. And it's almost like it's systematically, it's in shambles, like across the board. From parents, administration, to school districts, like across the board. It's just catastrophic. Especially coming out of the pandemic. So it's like, what can be done, like immediately? Like we need immediately change. It's not something that's going to take a long time, or it has to take, because it may take a long time regardless. But something has to. It'll be a shift change. So
Yeah.
what do you think we should implement for these changes, to make these drastic changes?
Well, the most immediate change is that we need a new state school superintendent.
Okay.
This is a guy who's been in office for 8 years. So I want you to think about the last 8 years. How long have you been teaching?
About 5.
Think about just the last 5 years of your teaching career. How much you have needed as a teacher in the classroom, what you've needed as a school district, and how nothing has changed. In fact, it's probably gotten worse. And so the most immediate change we can make is getting that guy out of there. I'm a parent of 3 school-age children. I don't have another 4 years for him to figure out, for him to wake up. When you hear him talking, it's like, oh, well, when I get elected, I'm going to do this. Sir, you have been in office for 8 years, okay? That's the first change. One of the other changes that I think can be done immediately is that we need to invest in literacy, right? You teach what grade?
This is 8th grade.
Ooh, so I bet you're seeing a lot of students who are not reading at grade level. Am I correct?
Correct.
Probably 2 or 3 grade levels behind, but we're still, and maybe a little bit more, especially now with COVID, but somehow you're still being held responsible for what they know, right? At knowing that they've come into you several grade levels behind. And so one of the problems is we have 181 school districts in our state, right? And we also have 181 different literacy approaches. So think about that. If you don't have, again, a leader who has established a shared vision for what we want for literacy in our state, you're never going to be able to address that. The national NAEP scores just came out last week. That's the national report card that tells us how we compare to other states. 2/3 of 4th graders are not proficient in reading. The exact number is 32% of 4th graders in Georgia are reading proficiently. 32%? That's a crisis. Let's talk about math, because you teach 8th grade. 26% of 8th graders in Georgia are proficient in math. just let that sink in for just a moment. And so when you think about all of the gaps that you are being responsible, right? You have to be responsible for filling. They came to you that way. But they want you to do magical tricks, right, to get them up to grade level when we have been failing them since at least the second or third grade. Because you didn't get to fourth grade not being able to read, right? You didn't show up in fourth grade. It happened perhaps because we didn't go to pre-K, we didn't start kindergarten. There are a lot of things that are happening in between. So Mississippi, as an example, went from 36 to 26 in reading scores in the country. Why? Because they have a universal literacy program. The state school superintendent, who I spent time with a few years ago, incorporated a universal literacy program, invested in resources, trained all the teachers, evaluated those resources, and guess what? Regardless of where a teacher is in the state, they all have access to high quality resources. So that's the second thing that I think needs to be done. And I hear you when you say we need some drastic changes in right now. I think a lot of the other changes, though, are going to take a little bit longer. It's going to take a year, 2 years to really change the way we look at public education. You think about your profession. Right now, would you recommend teaching to other people?
What do you mean by that?
Like if your students in your class, if they're saying, I think I want to be a teacher, would you recommend teaching to them as a profession?
I mean, I would love to have, I would love to have people teaching, but the systems in place doesn't really, in my opinion, does not really, cater to people that wanted to do it. It kind of discourages you from wanting to become education. So, yes, I kind of would like that, but it's like,
we gotta fix it.
You got to be honest. I'm gonna let you know. You coming in, you got some work to do. It's not like coming into a.
Right.
Definitely, when I was growing up, I feel like me growing up, teachers definitely had a different passion for teaching than it is now.
Yes.
So now it's like, it makes you discouraged to be a teacher.
And we don't want that. And so my point is, the research says that less than 30% of teachers are referring other professionals to go into teaching. That's scary. And it's because of the things that you're talking about and that you're experiencing every day. And it's not just the high stakes testing, that's a part of it. But it's the way parents are engaging with public education, it's the way society sees public education, it's the way we don't value teachers and teaching as a profession the way we should. And so there's a lot of work that has to be done, I think, to change the mindsets. So I'm imagining a big old statewide marketing campaign to really uplift teachers and the profession of teaching, to make my 9-year-old at my house who wants to be a teacher, to celebrate that, because there's something inside of her already that says, I want to be a teacher. How do we keep that? How do we grow our own? How do we make sure that when we talk about career pathways in high school that need to start in middle school, that teaching is one of those career pathways, right? And that we're making it exciting. So there's a lot of work to do to get us there. And I want to make sure teachers are at the table to help us design that campaign and reimagine what this looks like.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up data, because data is definitely important in the teaching profession.
Yes.
So speaking of data, I know that only 2% of teachers are black males. I find that problematic, seeing the fact that most of our students are, mostly colored.
Absolutely.
And they say now that what the average teacher is a white woman.
Mm-hmm.
So you got white women teaching black children or colored children.
Correct.
And I find a problem with that. Why do you think that's the case?
I think it's the same thing that we're talking about. The teaching profession is not attractive to enough people. The salary, right? You're talking about men, and if you believe in, the traditional model, right, of men having to take care of their households, starting at $39,000, which is the average starting salary in Georgia, is not attractive to a traditional male who's got to take care of a family. So we have to think about, how do we make it attractive? How do we make it so that people can, earn a real living? I think it's ridiculous that teachers have to work 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet. I do want to mention one of my very good friends, Curtis Valentine, runs an organization called Real Men Teach.
Okay.
And it's all about, getting the brothers into the classroom. So for those of you who are watching and interested or want to learn more, Real Men Teachers is the name of the organization, and it's Curtis Valentine is the founder.
Okay, Curtis Valentine.
So he's all about getting more men in the classroom. And there are a couple of efforts. I know Morehouse is doing something, but we need to do a lot more because, to your point, we need our young brothers to see men, right, of all kinds standing in front of them who are showing them that teaching is a great profession, that you can be a role model, right, and you can, in some cases, fill gaps where there may not be men in their community, right, like the way they should see them, but just to be a part of our culture, right, and a part of their learning experience. Even when I think about my upbringing, I grew up in Florida, I can think of maybe 2 black men that I had as teachers my entire K through 12 career. That's a challenge.
Me as well, so I understand.
Yeah. So we gotta fix that.
Yeah, we do. So 39,000. So this is what I don't understand. Like, why don't they want to pay for teachers? Like, where is that coming from? Like, why do you feel like it's okay to pay a teacher $39,000 a year?
I think we just haven't had anyone standing up. We all talk about it, oh, teachers need to be paid more. But I don't think much has been done about it. The K-12 budget is K-12 and the university system budget collectively are 52% of our state budget.
Say one more time.
K-12 in our university system, so the college system, 52% of our entire state budget.
Oh wow.
Yes. So we spend a lot of money on public education in Georgia, and most of that is salaries. But we need to do more. We've got a significant surplus at the state, and all the districts have a surplus because of the federal funds that they've received. We just need to make it a priority. Money is not the problem. Priorities is the problem.
Priorities, okay, priorities. So now I didn't watch the debate between you and Mr. Woods.
You need to watch it.
I need to watch it.
Yes, it's good TV.
So just give us a little synopsis of what particularly happened. Like what? Like.
Well, let me see. So we were asked about the whole CRT. Have you heard about that whole?
Yes, we talked about that on an episode of last year. So yes, we're.
So we all know that CRT is not taught in classrooms.
Correct.
And this has really been this just political thing, right? And here's part of where it came from. And you were talking about the debate. I don't want to get too much into this, but it's political. We know it's not being taught. But Richard Woods, the current state school superintendent, got a policy passed at the State Department of Education to ban CRT and to ban books. Now, he's done nothing else for 8 years, but he did get that policy passed at the State Board of Education. So that was one of the first questions that was asked. And so one of the moderators or questioners said, well, talk about CRT and book banning and why you passed that policy. He couldn't answer it. If you're pushing for something, you should be able to specifically say, this is why I did it. They asked him, give an example of one of the pieces of history that you wouldn't want taught. He couldn't answer the question, but you pushed the policy. So when it was my turn to answer the question, I said, CRT is not taught in classrooms. I said, but what frustrates me is teachers are already frustrated. Teachers are already concerned. And so here you now have passed another policy that ties another hand behind their back and keeps you from doing the thing that you've been trained to do. So it's the ultimate slap in the face. So we talked about that. But here's what got, there's Alisha Searcy who's running for state school superintendent. And then sometimes Keisha has to come out. So he met Keisha on the stage a few weeks ago because I was explaining in one of my answers that school safety is a big issue.
Most definitely.
And again, I have 3 children at home, so this is real for me. So my daughter, who's a 15-year-old, talked about at her school, I'm like, well, how's it going? How are y'all feeling? And she was like, it's all over TikTok, but we know nobody's going to do anything. And I was just hurt by hearing Layla say that. So I mentioned that in the debate. Richard Woods then says, anybody who thinks that we're not doing anything about school safety is living in a fantasy world. So you're talking about my baby? because my children go to school every day. So what you will not do is basically discount what my daughter is feeling and experiencing every day in school. When we all watch the news, we see guns being brought to school. We're watching in St. Louis last week a child come in and kill two people. School safety is a serious issue, and not enough is being done about it, if anything at all, from this Department of Education. You see how Keisha just came out? Did you see that?
Yes, we did.
So when you talk about my children, you're gonna get me fired up. But I would encourage your viewers to watch the debate, because what you will also notice is one of us is really clear about a vision and understanding what needs to happen in education, and the other one is just waking up from an 8-year nap. He didn't have a plan. When we were on the same stage in June at an event, he didn't have an agenda. He didn't have a platform. Then after he heard me speak, all of a sudden, we're going to do something about school safety. Sir, you are in office right now. It's not about what we're going to do. It is, here's what I have done. Here's what I have done about teacher pay. Here's what I have done about reading scores. Last thing I'm going to say about this. The NAEP scores I just mentioned. 32% of fourth graders are reading proficiently. 26% of eighth graders are proficient in math. I'm gonna give you one guess what the state school superintendent said about the scores this week.
And I didn't. That's interesting. Oh,
Just guess what you think a state school superintendent would say about 26% of eighth graders being proficient in math.
it's the teacher's fault.
No. He said he was pleased and encouraged by the numbers. He did say that he appreciates the job that teachers do. But those two things don't go together.
He's pleased.
Pleased and encouraged.
Is it an improvement from the year before? Is that why he said
No.
that?
It was steady. 2019, we had the same scores in reading. It went down from 2019 for math.
Oh wow. Okay.
So what are we pleased about? What's encouraging about that? Because when you're living this every day, you don't get to say this is pleasing and encouraging. Because I want my soon-to-be third grader to be able to read proficiently. So that is the problem, that this guy is just asleep at the wheel.
Oh my goodness. So I guess we are going to post that link on our video once we do post this to give all
Please
viewers.
watch it, okay?
I definitely
Hear
will watch
me.
it.
Watch it.
Yes. So you kind of got a lot of stuff covered.
I know, because I talk so much.
It's fine,
I got a lot to say.
and I'm loving it. And so now my next thing I do want to talk about is the American Federation of Teachers. So so I am a member of the organization because I believe that teachers should be part of a union to push policies and to push our agenda that needs to be passed. So that's the reason why I joined the organization. So previously I was actually an organizer. I organized for the Hillary Clinton campaign and also the Joe Biden campaign to try to to get the people that we have in office today. And on the campaign, I asked, what can we do as far as the teachers? What can we do to make the changes? And their response was, join the teachers union. That's where the policy changed. And so I said, okay, well, why not go to teachers union? So I chose the Federation of Teachers because I think it gives you those parameters where your supervisor or assistant principals or principals are not allowed to be in the federation. In the other organizations you can, and I kind of like that kind of policy. And then my mentors suggested that I join the AFT, which is why I am currently a member. So it just kind of saddens me. Not say saddens, but kind of disappointing. That it seems like the union can't be on accord with who to endorse as a candidate for this position. They're not endorsing anyone. So I want to get an understanding of, why isn't the organization endorsing, and what do we need to do for it? Because at the end of the day, the teachers need what we need. And that's all I really am concerned about. Anything else I can't be that much concerned about, but I am concerned about the teachers and
I am
what needs to be done. So why is all this happening for a person that knows nothing about politics or nothing about what's going on?
So what I can do is tell you why I think AFT should support me.
Okay.
And why teachers should support me.
Okay.
What I cannot do is tell you why the AFT has decided not to support me, because I don't want to speak for them.
Okay.
I can tell you, so let me start with why I think you should support me. I talked about my record when I was superintendent, bringing our teacher retention rate from 25% to 75%. You don't do that by not supporting teachers, okay? So when you're talking about policy changes, when you're talking about how can I make sure that somebody's going to be in office who cares about me and my needs, I have the track record of doing that. Mr. Woods does not. He's been in office for 8 years. And my guess is most of the people who are watching this don't even know who Richard Woods is. Probably never heard of him. When I went to his town a few weeks ago, he's from Tift County, Georgia, or lives there. Nobody in his town knew him either. That's a problem. But I think you ought to vote for me because I have a real plan about how to make sure we address this teacher burnout issue. And it's everything from creating the office of the teacher advocate. I want a full-time staff focused on what do you need as a teacher. Spending time in classrooms, holding meetings, getting resources so you don't have to spend your own money to decorate your class. Okay?
Right.
The things that matter to you. That's what I want to have the entire team focused on. I want to address teacher pay. I want to get 2 different laws passed because I'm a former state legislator, and we've not had a state school superintendent who's been that, by the way. One, to deal with mental health. I want you to have mental health days where you can take off. You don't have to laugh,
Okay.
right? I know you feel me on that.
I definitely do.
But you can take a real mental health day or 2 or 3, depending on how much we can get in the budget, that the state pays for because you need time off. You need mental health days, and I want to normalize mental health. The second law that I want to see passed is one that guarantees time off for teachers who are parents and need to be able to take time off for your parent-teacher conferences. I understand the experience of teachers, right? Haven't been one, but I've been a superintendent, been very close to what teachers need. And so there are a number of other things that I want to do. But I think what's most important here is teachers deserve a champion. Someone who will stand up for them, who will advocate for them when it comes to policy. When I passed, I was one of the co-sponsors of the teacher evaluation law, TEKS and leaks, right?
Okay.
The law itself is a skeleton, that this is what we need to have an evaluation system, right? It needs to have 4 different levels, just a few things in there. The State Department of Education is responsible for creating the actual tool. Richard Woods has been complaining that the tool has all these problems. But sir, you're the one person who can actually fix it because you run the Department of Education. He hasn't done anything about it. When I became superintendent, guess what? I had to implement TEKS and leaks. I saw the problems. And so now I want to be the state school superintendent so that I can address some of those things. Clearly I could talk all day. Let me just talk about this AFT thing. And I don't speak for AFT. I'm not a member. There's folks, 1 or 2 who may not like me, not because they know me, not because there's a relationship, not because I've ever done anything to anyone. I think there may be a difference of policy position, and this is important for me to set the record straight. I support all public school choice, all of it. So that's contract schools. You're in APS, right?
Yes, I am.
So APS has contract schools, right? You have charter schools, right? You have all kinds of options. In fact, APS has the largest number of charter schools in the entire state of Georgia. Was your job ever in jeopardy because there was a charter school down the street?
Nothing I can think of.
Are y'all losing students? Are they walking out the door because there are charter schools in existence?
Not that.
So there's these rumors and misinformation and just straight out lies that people tell about public charter schools. I support public charter schools because I think parents should have options. I grew up in Florida. I went to a performing arts magnet school. Magnet schools can choose who they want based on test scores, behavior records, you got a green eye, whatever. They can choose. Charter schools cannot do that. They're like any other public school. If you go to if you're in the grade level that we serve and you live in APS, you are eligible to go to this school. I don't get your behavior records or your test scores or your grades until after you are enrolled in the school. But some of the folks who don't support charters would have you believe, oh, you're getting the best of the best, you're getting the cream of the. That is just not true. And so I think there's a policy difference. There's also some lies
Okay.
that people say, well, I have somehow had this agenda that I want to privatize education. We've been talking for 45 minutes, I'm guessing. Have I said anything about private schools?
No.
Have I mentioned any laws that I've passed about private schools? No. It has never been my agenda. Do I respect people who decide to use private school as an option for their child? Absolutely. Those are your children. But my work, my record, my legacy, my blood, sweat, and tears, let me put it this way, has always been and always will be in public education. And so what I have heard, because I can't speak for anyone, is that there's some misinformation that I somehow voted for a voucher bill, which I have never done, that I've never made a speech, never voted for, never pushed. There's nothing on the record of me doing anything with private schools. And so what is sad to me is you have thousands of teachers across the state who have not had a champion in the governor's office, in the Department of Education, sitting out of the most important race to you. Because the governor can have a vision on education, but he or she is going to have 15 other issues to deal with. When I wake up every day, the only thing I'm going to be focused on is public education. So it would seem to me that AFT and GAE and all these other groups would be solely focused on who is going to do something on behalf of teachers. So to stay out or to choose the guy who's been asleep at the wheel, who is more concerned about CRT and banning books than doing anything about the frustration you feel on testing, on burnout, on feeling overwhelmed, on all the paperwork that you have, you name it, nothing has been done. And so it's, to me, and with all due respect, we already have teachers who are not paid enough. So you don't get paid enough, but then you pay your dues to an organization that's playing politics rather than choosing the candidate who's going to do something for you. And so I appreciate those teachers who are members of AFT, members of GAE and others who said, you know what, I see what y'all did on this endorsement. You can't really give me a good reason why you're not supporting Alisha, so I'm gonna do my own research, watch the debate, go to our website, see the difference. I'm gonna choose Alisha because she actually understands what it means to be an educator, as a parent, as a former superintendent, as a state legislator. The other guy who's been in office for 8 years has had 8 years to do something, and he has demonstrated to you he is not going to do a darn thing. And so I get fired up about this because it's politics. It's why I stayed out of politics for 8 years. I was good. I was in 12 in the state legislature. I was out for 8. I hate politics because unless I had this opportunity to speak with you, most teachers are not going to know, especially AFT members, are not going to know the backstory of why AFT decided not to endorse in this race. And that's sad because you could be operating from misinformation, not having enough information, and the stakes are too high, right? There are children on the other side of these decisions. Right? That's why you got into education. It wasn't for the job, it wasn't for the perks, right? Mm-hmm. It's because those babies that you serve every day. It's why I got into education. But they are not well served when we let politics get in the way. So that's why.
Wow, okay. Okay, that was...
I know I've worn you out. I can talk a lot, but it's such an important thing, and I wanted you to have it all. And I think it's important to ask the questions. Ask substantive questions. Why aren't you endorsing in this race? Tell me about this candidate. Tell me about this candidate.
And it makes me think, because I know it's different. I know it's the Atlanta Federation of Teachers, and it's Georgia Federation of Teachers, and then it's the American Federation of Teachers. Mm-hmm. And I know each of them may endorse different candidates. Like I know with Stacey Abrams, the Georgia Federation of Teachers did not support her, but the American Federation of Teachers supported her, which it makes it confusing. It's like, okay, is it AFT? Is it American Federation of Teachers not supporting? Is it Georgia Federation of Teachers, or is it Atlanta Federation of Teachers? Like, who is what is going on, pretty much?
Well, it's my understanding that one person leads both the local and the state here.
That's correct.
So whatever she wants is what's going to happen with both of those entities. Um, Again, I don't want to speak on anything that I don't have direct conversations with, but to me, it all comes down to politics. Because if the local is not doing the same thing as the international, that ought to be a clue that something's not right. Somebody's making decisions, even the labor unions, and I think this is really important to note. I spent 12 years in the Georgia House of Representatives. I had a 100% voting record on labor issues and a 100% voting record on teacher union issues. So you tell me what happened between those 12 years when I served, the 8 years when I was not in office, and now all of a sudden, I don't support public education, I'm this, I'm that. Something else is going on. And it has nothing to do with my track record. And I want to be judged on my track record. I want to be judged on the things that I have done. I want to be judged on the bills that I've passed, the difference that I've made in the lives of those children that I served as superintendent. Judge me on that. Not based on what somebody thinks, somebody heard, rumors, or someone who's only seen me one time in their entire life.
And the sad thing about education is that, you know, you go to one side of town, you know, and you see quality education. It could be within the same district.
Yeah.
And you go on the other side of the highway and it's the opposite.
Yeah.
So why is that? If you're saying it's not like you can't say that it's not available, quality education is not available, why is it only this school is not getting it, or in this school gets it? Like, no one can ever answer those types of questions. Like, what could be causing that?
There's a lot that causes that. And again, it's why having this background as a policymaker is really important, and being a practitioner, because I can understand how these things are coming together or not. The second office that I want to create in the Department of Education, one is the Office of the Teacher Advocate. The second is the Office of Equity. No one is talking about those inequitable policies, practices that are happening north versus south, east versus west, you know, Sandy Springs versus South Fulton, right? North Atlanta, right, versus South Atlanta. It comes down to a few things. Policy decisions that are being made at the school board level that sometimes are known and understood and intentional, and sometimes are not. So there's a policy piece to this, and helping districts to understand how their decisions are inequitable, right? But there's also what the research says. The research says that your more experienced teachers are going to go in areas that are more high income, where your less experienced teachers are going to go in lower income areas, and they're not going to stay as long. So when you think about all the training that you've gotten over the last 5 years and where you are as a teacher now versus where you were in year one, our babies in our lower income communities are getting more of the year one, year two teachers. And so you may be very talented, but there's still a whole bunch of stuff that you don't quite know until you get into that classroom that we're not teaching in our university systems. And so we've got to address the inequality of the quality of teachers in a classroom. We've got to talk about the fact that curriculum is not a reflection of the students that we serve, especially in the era of banning books, right? Because if you're trying to ban Toni Morrison, right, and people that look like us, it's important to have culturally relevant curriculum. But in Georgia, we don't have that. In fact, we have a state school superintendent who's trying to move us in the opposite direction. And so it's effective teaching, it's having the right resources, it's policy that is impacting how decisions are made. And it's also the squeaky wheel is the one that gets the oil. And so we've got to also empower parents. We've got to make education a part of our community fabric, that teachers and parents and others can demand more for the children that we serve who need the resources the most. Because I guarantee you, if there are more parents from, you know, other parts of Atlanta that came to the Atlanta Public School Board meeting or the Fulton County Board meeting, a lot more would change. But if you're not there, I'm only hearing from the parents in North Atlanta, you know, they have the prettiest buildings. There are certain things they're just not going to accept. And the school board knows that, right? Now, you happen to have a school board, I think, made up of people who truly understand equity. You have a whole office of equity in Atlanta. It's
That's
part
correct.
of where I got my idea from. And so I believe this superintendent and this board, and I think even the previous one, has really been focused on that. So I believe there are going to be changes, but as a state, we're nowhere close. And so it's complex, and it's not a quick, you know, oh, it's because of this. There's several things that are contributing to why we see so many inequities in our education system. And it requires leadership and someone who understands the big picture and the research and how this looks in practice in order to change those things and make a difference.
And so, I'm glad to hear that, because it disappoints me again, you know, to see, you know, different groups learning a different curriculum, you know, more specialized curriculum, and then somehow it's like it's not equaling together, like, and
It's not.
and no one really gives you an answer, but it's like that's what the culture is in place. It's like we're not.
And we've come to expect it and accept it, and it's not acceptable. And I know this as a parent because, again, going back to my 15-year-old, when we lived in South Cobb, there was one type of education she was getting. We moved over to West Cobb. It's like night and day. The resources, the emails, the support that she gets. My 15-year-old has an IEP. So I know what it's like, right, to be at the table advocating for her every year. This is what she needs. The general ed teachers generally had no clue, frankly, on what accommodations she needed and how to make that happen. But I'm sitting in meetings because I'm an educator, helping them to understand what she needs. But what about the parents who don't have a degree in education? Who don't know what an IEP is, or a CCRPI, or EIP, or all these, the alphabet soup as we call it. We've got to empower parents and truly make them a part of our education system. And we also have to make it so that it doesn't matter the kid's zip code, that they're going to get access to high quality resources.
I'm glad you brought up parents. This is my last topic. Parents is that's the big thing right there.
Yeah. And I hate this question, just for the record, but go on.
Yes, because and I understand. I'm a teacher. I understand. You know, parents have to work. You know, they have all this stuff going on, and it seems like it's bigger than just education. Like, why is it that parents don't have time? You know, parents don't have time to come up to the school, come to conferences.
Yeah.
You know, to actually get an understanding of what's going on in school, as opposed to other schools. They have the time. And I know it's because of work, but it's just kind of that I can't wrap my head around that one. Like, what can be done about the parents?
The reason I hate this question is, again, it's complex, and we love these, you know, simple answers. Just tell me this one thing, and I'm gonna vote for you. I can't. Mm-hmm. I am the type. I'm gonna tell you from all of my experiences, it's complicated, and it's not a one thing. It's gonna fix it in 2 months. We got to start with the fact that many of our parents are products of the education system that their children are now in. So if we do that right, they may not value education the way we want them to, right? And I'm not saying that poor parents don't care about education. I'm not saying any of those things. I am saying that as a culture, as a society, we don't value education the way we should. And I say that thinking about my travels across the world, going to China as an example, where the entire community is built around what's best for the children in school. Grandparents retire in their 40s and 50s because they need to stay home with the children while the parents go off to work. Many of their children don't even go past the 8th grade because they've decided these are the ones who are college material and these are the ones who are in the workforce. I'm not saying that's the approach that we should have, but I am saying even when it comes to teachers, in their teacher programs, you have to be the highest test takers, right? The most intelligent, the best of the best in order for you to even be a teacher. So there are a lot of systems that they put in place to honor and value education and educators. We don't have that. We don't respect teachers the way that we need to. Sometimes we're okay when mama comes in showing out at the school. Right? We think that's cute. But in some countries, that would not happen. And so we first have to fix the way we see education. The second thing is, I pause for a minute. I'm thinking about a relationship that I like talking about solutions. So I have like the support of maybe 75 pastors across the state.
Okay.
I'm very grateful for that. And I've said to them, so you're signing up on this list, but this is really like a contract. Because not only are you supporting me, but you are saying, I'm signing up to be in this relationship with you because we're going to have relationships between schools, school districts, the Department of Education, and the faith community. This is probably the hardest question in education because it's the thing you can't control. I think the way we address it, though, is changing the way we see education as a society, as a community. I think if we value education like we do, like they do in other countries, we would see a change in how we see it in America and certainly in Georgia. I think we need to focus on the things that we can control. We can control building partnerships, like with the faith community and getting them to engage with parents. You know, parents listen to their pastors, right? So having those kind of partnerships, and it's something I'm very proud of. I have the support of over 70 pastors across the state. And what I plan to do when elected is partner with them and create those relationships between schools, school districts, Department of Education, faith community. I think we also need to define, what do we mean by parent engagement? Do we mean bake a cookie and come to the bake sale for the PTA meeting? Does it mean choose what school is best for your child? Does it mean have the tools to engage well in a parent-teacher conference? Does it mean make sure your kids clean when they come to school every day? Right? Does it mean read to them when they're in utero? So we've got to define what that means and then share that as a community. But I am hopeful. I believe that parents really do want the best for our children. We just have to, and maybe we have to accept that for some parents it's this, some parents it's that. Maybe where parents can't come because they really are working 2 or 3 jobs and they really are trying to figure this all out, that we allow other adults to come in and be that advocate for the child, because we want all kids to have some other adult who's standing in the gap for them.
Let's get back. So maybe I might let you. I don't even know my pastor. I go to Elizabeth Baptist Church. You know my
He is
pastor?
one of my supporters.
Okay, cool. I'm glad to hear that.
Yes,
So,
in fact, my husband is a member. So
Wow.
we've been married through COVID, so I haven't officially joined yet with him, but yes.
okay, so he goes to Elizabeth Baptist Church.
Yes.
Wow, learn something new every day.
Church member.
Yeah, and so I've been a member for 13 years. So
Wow.
yeah, I was in college. I went to Clark Lane University. And then they kind of had a partnership. Well, he's a Clark Lane graduate, so I think that partnership started, and I just ended up staying. So I stayed in Atlanta. I'm like, okay, I don't know any other church, so
Right.
I ended up growing in love with the church. So
Yeah, I love their ministry. It's very good.
yes.
But yes, Bishop Oliver.
Yes, Bishop. I'm sorry, Bishop Oliver.
Bishop Oliver is a supporter. He's one of those on that list.
Okay, good. Well, thank you. We definitely gotta have you on our should I have you? I know Stacey Abrams came a couple weeks ago. Al Sharpton came last week. You know, maybe have you up on the stage.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yes.
Tell Bishop to call me.
Okay. Well, think about that. Well, again, thank you for coming with us. Thank you for giving us clarification on what's going on. Because again, I'm a regular person. Teaching. I don't know the politics like per se, but
Ignore the politics. Let's keep the children out of the woods.
Yes.
And vote for me, please.
Okay. So, any words of action you want to leave us by?
Go vote.